Hi, everyone, and welcome. I'm Rachel Buss, VP of Strategic Insights here at Curion. Thank you so much for joining us as we start to explore how real-world research helps brands see what really happens after a product leaves the lab. A couple of housekeeping notes before we dive in. If you have any questions as you go along, please drop those questions into the chat. While we won't be doing a Q&A at the end of today, we do have a team online who's going to answer questions as we go. Today's session is being recorded and will be sent out to all registrants tomorrow. However, we encourage you to stay on throughout today's entire session so that you can hear about our special offer for live attendees, as well as if you were one of our early signups, the winner of the Bose headphones will be announced in the chat before we all log off for the day. So with that, let's kick it off. Today's webinar serves as the official launch of Curion's in-market research platform. What is in-market? To answer that, we have a short intro video we'd love to share.
How a product performs in a controlled environment is not necessarily how it performs in real life. Consumers are distracted. Comparison shopping can put a dent in the best-laid go-to-market plans. Using products in real life and in actual kitchens at the end of a long day does not look like it does on TV. That's why we created Curion In-Market. We capture feedback from actual consumers in actual purchase and usage moments, at the shelf, in their hands, in their homes, where decisions are made and loyalty is earned or lost. Through targeted recruitment, real-time mobile intercepts, or post-purchase invitations, we reach consumers where your product actually lives. See the gaps between promise and delivery. Gain insight into what drives the shelf decision and what drives repeat purchases. Discover how packaging performs in real-world chaos. This is product truth in context, in moments that matter. Curion In-Market. Real-world product, real-life insights.
Now that we've introduced you to In-Market, I'd love to introduce you to today's speakers. Joining me are three of Curion's amazing researchers who each led a topic into Curion's Intelligence Reports series, Curion's own deep dives into the topics our experts are most passionate about. Starting us off will be Teresa Farrell, Director of Strategic Product Insights, who will walk us through a deep dive into casual dining. We'll talk to Tiffany Gruby, Senior Director of Strategic Market Insights, who will share lessons from the skincare aisle. And we'll wrap up our day with Grady Smith, Manager of Strategic Market Insights, who will explore the world of functional sodas. But enough about us. What about you? What can you expect to get from today's webinar? While we all know and loved controlled testing, quiet rooms, timed bites, and clean data, what we'll show you today through these three mini case studies is what's possible to learn when the product enters the real world and you let a little chaos enter your data. Drive-thrus, grocery aisles, bathroom counters will show you how context can change everything. We'll be sharing how those lived experiences reveal what the lab can't capture and how connecting the two gives brands a fuller, more actionable story. So to kick us off, let's start at the table, quite literally, with Teresa and our casual dining study.
Thanks, Rachel. Happy to be here today. My example of in-market research focused on understanding what it would take to bring diners back to in-restaurant dining at our casual restaurants, where we know the impact of recent years has shown significant decline within this restaurant category. In-market allowed us to explore the entire product experience from start to finish, and we wanted to understand what makes a meal feel worth it again. So what we did is we sent diners back to restaurants that they'd once liked but hadn't visited in months and weren't top of mind for them any longer. We were interested in understanding both the dining and the product experience. So we chose a common menu item to compare across the brands, the good old American cheeseburger. Each consumer was asked to order a basic cheeseburger build for that restaurant brand. And in addition to evaluating the burger, they were asked to take note of the busyness and cleanliness of the restaurant, the wait time to be seated, the time it took to be brought menus and get their food, And then they also evaluated the menu and the special offerings, or the value menu. For this project, we tapped into our entire panel network, which not only provided a good geographical representation, but also accounted for potential operational variability across the restaurants.
What drove the desire to focus on lapsed guests?
Well, who better to include but the diners who are no longer visiting? Consumers that at one point had an affinity for the brand, but for some reason or another lost the connection. So we felt these consumers who are being choiceful with where they spend their dollars, we knew they'd pay close attention to every detail that we asked them to evaluate. It's also a big reason value menus are so popular right now. In-restaurant casual dining has been declining, as I mentioned before, and casual restaurants are trying to win that consideration. So in addition to a good value offer, we wanted to see what it takes to re-earn loyalty from the people who've already walked away from the restaurant once.
So what happened after you sent these people on this adventure?
So what stood out most was how the entire experience drives return intent. The wait time, the tone of the service, how the food looks when it hits the table. Those small details are things that could change everything. Even the time that it takes to be seated, to order, to receive the food presents the perfect opportunity to build that brand affinity. Consumers notice the friendly check-in, of course they notice the complimentary items. It turned their waiting into a connection. So they felt like the restaurant really cared that they were there. Some also noticed the opposite, the lack of attention. And that made waiting a couple of minutes seem like you've been forgotten.
Makes me think about the experiences where you go to the restaurant and you get the peanuts and you kind of like crack them open and you have that kind of vibe at the very beginning. Everyone wants to go there almost for the wait time because you enjoy, for whatever reason, sitting in the waiting room, cracking those peanuts and eating them, even though you could go get a package very easily at home. But it's part of that whole like ambiance.
Yeah, exactly.
Entire feel.
Exactly. It doesn't make your wait time seem quite so long, rather than if you're just sitting there waiting for the next thing to happen.
So you talked a little bit about value menus. You mentioned it a little bit at the top of your discussion here. Mm-hmm. How does that fit in the total experience? Value wars are very hot in the restaurant sector. How does that play into casual dining?
Yeah, great question. So special offers and deals may be a reason to get consumers in the door to try again, but it's not necessarily the guarantee that they're going to come back. So we've seen, as you mentioned, the value wars have heated up and price point is at the center of all of it. So while when we're doing our CLTs, we typically measure price and value to ensure that the product's offered at a reasonable price. But once we get that product in the wild, there are so many other factors that can make or break a product's success. So we learned through this in-market research that it's not just about the price. When you're tying emotions into your value offer, it can really set you apart from the rest of the brands. So some things to consider. Does your value offer provide a low risk way to try something new? Does it encourage bonding and sharing with family and friends? Does it offer variety? Does it provide high quality meal without feeling like a splurge? So those are all things that consumers are looking for with that value offer. We also saw that in real life, value is emotional. It's not the cheapest price. It's about whether the full experience feels worth it. Guests will pay more when the quality and the atmosphere will match the cost. The savings need to be meaningful, which help to justify dining out more. And one of the quotes that came from this research that I thought kind of summed this up really well is from one of our female consumers that said, "A value meal makes me feel like I'm getting the full dining experience without breaking the bank. I can treat my family and still feel good about what I spent."
So I know you and your team do a lot of controlled research studies in this total sector. Anything surprise you compared to what you typically see in, say, a lab study, a controlled setting?
Yeah, definitely. So we saw that food quality alone doesn't predict loyalty. Experience did. So in our facilities, we evaluate products for acceptance and for superiority, and it's essential that we get that product innovation or that improved process correct before it's launched. But in the real world, even great food can't fix a poor experience. And a strong experience can elevate even an average product. So it all ties hand in hand together.
So if you have to win in both worlds, right? You have to win on the plate and the experience, and you have these lapsed consumers coming in. What happens when it all kind of melds together? What happens when the experience and the product all click?
Yeah, that's exactly where we see the opportunity for the biggest turnarounds. So in this research, we saw lapsed guests are surprisingly open to coming back. We saw brands that had weak perceptions prior to the visit with the biggest lift, upwards of 40% in likelihood of returning again. And even the stronger brands, so those that necessarily didn't have the strongest product, they still grew around 20% because that whole experience was complete for them. So one great visit can completely reset a consumer's perception of your brand. Just to summarize, guests define value emotionally and not just by cost. So it's the quality, the service, the atmosphere, and that creates that worth it feeling. From the first time they step in to the last bite, every moment counts. So, and you can't capture that in a lab, only in the real world. So I'm sure if I asked the rest of the panel, they would all have an example of a dine-in experience that stands out in their mind and is the reason they continue or have stopped visiting a particular restaurant. Seen some head nods. And just closing note, there are also chains that have built their entire strategy, kind of like the peanut example you provided earlier, on that experience and what that experience is for consumers. Now, that might be a little extreme, but the in-restaurant experience just can't be forgotten.
I think that's great. I think when I think about the peanut experience, you go because the peanuts, because you have a little bit of that, but then you have to want to come for the food as well, right? I'm not just going to go somewhere because they have great peanuts. So you want them to have that whole experience kind of stand together. One can't just stand alone. Fantastic research, Teresa. Thank you so much. I'm hoping you had as much fun digging into the data and doing the research yourself as we did about hearing about it. So from the dining rooms, we're now going to pivot to the bathroom counters, and we're going to move to skincare. Tiffany, take us on the journey to glow.
Yeah, so I'm going to take you through a couple of highlights from our recent in-market study, Journey to Glow. I'm going to start off by just talking a little bit, why skincare? Why did we think this was an important area to explore? This is a massive industry. I've been following this industry for my entire 20-year career, and it is both huge, $446 billion, up 10% since 2022, but it's also changing really quickly. We're seeing more men come into the skincare category than ever before, a 68% increase in the last 3 years. So as researchers, we really wanted to understand in the skincare category, moisturization in particular, how are men and women viewing the category differently, and where are there similarities? And in this study, we looked at motivations, usage, and the emotional connection that drives decision-making, both first-time selection and then also loyalty. To do this in-market research, our approach was actually to send consumers into stores, a store that they typically purchase facial skincare for. We did this with both men and women of all different age groups, backgrounds, skin tones, skin types. And all of our participants were current category users, but of varying engagement levels. We had them go to the store, buy something. So they had to use their own money to actually select something that was new to them, and then take it home and experience the product and share with us what that experience looked like. While they were in store, they did lots of video recording and pictures to help us understand how do they navigate the aisle, what was important to them, what stood out to them as they were making that selection. And what I love about in-market and this approach is it's a really powerful way to shore up that say-do gap. You know, when we're doing things like IDIs or focus groups, we often hear key themes that consumers say are super, super important to them. But when we actually send them into the store to use their own money to buy these things, that's where we really start to see what is actually important to them. So it's a great way to get those really organic and important insights that are really going to drive your business in the biggest way.
So as a woman, I've been in the skincare game for a long time, right? They start training us in high school about moisturizers and toners and half a dozen things that you should be using. Do we know why men are suddenly starting to enter this category, or have they always been there and no one noticed, or how did we get to this place?
That is a great question and probably a study in and of itself. However, I will say, we are definitely, and I'll talk about this in a little bit, we are definitely seeing younger men in particular really starting to change the game. So while men in general are in the skincare category at a much higher rate than they were even 3 years ago, we're seeing that younger men in particular are coming in with a much greater sense of the category. They're more educated, they're more curious. There's a lot more resources that are helping to inform their perceptions and attitudes about the category. And so we're seeing much higher engagement levels for younger men in particular.
Okay, so you sent them into stores. What did we find?
Yeah, so go ahead so I'm going to talk a little bit about the differences on here. One of the biggest things that we learned was when it comes to motivations, why are you even in the category? What are you looking for? We see some pretty stark differences between men and women. And again, this is men on the whole, and I'll talk in a minute about, some of the differences that we saw in men depending upon their age. But men in general are really seeking healthy, clear, and comfortable skin. You'll hear me say comfort many times throughout this presentation, because that's really what men are seeking. They typically have an active problem that they're trying to address. So I have very dry skin. It hurts. I want relief. And their approach tends to be really focused on ease and simplicity. I don't need 100. I don't need 100 products. I need a couple that really do pack a punch when it comes to the results that I'm seeing. Women, on the other hand, come into the category. They're motivated to be in the category, often for youthfulness. They're looking for the results that, to keep them looking young, to keep them looking fresh, to keep them looking radiant. This is why we see so many products in the marketplace really aimed at anti-aging benefits. And what was interesting when we talked to women and men, like I talked about with men really are entering the category or using the category as a way to alleviate a challenge that they're having, whereas women tend to be much more preventative in their approach and their routines. This is really important because when they walk into the aisle, their frame of reference is different. And so what you need to do as a brand to stand out in this place, in the marketplace, is different based on men versus women. When it comes to shopping experiences, we saw women and men approach the way that they shop pretty differently. Women tend to be walking into a store or search, typically in a store, and are much more inclined and gravitate towards experiential shopping environments. So this is why you see, retailers that specifically are targeting beauty consumers really standing out. If you watch women in this space and how they navigate the beauty aisles, you see them really wanting to engage with the product. So, they're opening things, they're using the testers, they're smelling, they're really looking for those experiential cues and those sensory cues that are going to give them confidence in their selection. Men, on the other hand, are, much more driven by efficiency. So they're looking to shop in places that they're already shopping. And this is why we see them tend to gravitate towards things like drug or mass environments that they're already, planning to make a stop at. It's easy for them to add on facial skincare. We also see low pressure environments really standing out with men in particular. So Men tend to gravitate towards online shopping for skincare because it gives them a low pressure way to do their own research. They don't have consultants coming up and asking them how they can help. And there certainly is, as we were talking to men and women about their experiences, for men in particular, there does seem to be this kind of foundational knowledge that is missing. Many of them felt a little uneasy about, their lack of knowledge in this space. And so that movement online isn't just about price and convenience that we so often see in the online shopping world. It's also about this education gap. And I think that represents a really big opportunity for brands to help fill. Lastly, when it comes to claims, so as shoppers are walking through the aisles, what are they gravitating towards? What is pulling them in? What's making them stop in their tracks? Women tended to shop the aisles, looking for things like hero ingredients. These, things like collagen, hyaluronic acid. They know these words. They know what they do, or they know these ingredients. They know what they do. And these ingredients are giving them the important information that they need in order to tell them that the product is going to work. On the flip side, men are much more inclined to search or to walk aisles or search online, looking for brands that they already know and trust, and focused claims. So rather than talking about ingredients, they're looking for information that tells them what's the ingredient going to do for me. So, it's not just about hyaluronic acid. It's this product is going to do the benefit of hyaluronic acid better. Or that gives them proof that the product is going to work.
So I think this is really fascinating, especially when I think about the shopping element. If you go into any mass type store, there are entire sections dedicated to women's skincare, as opposed to the men's section, which is like half an aisle, if even that. So as I think about, as this area grows, will we see larger sections for men? Will they have to get used to going down multiple aisles to be able to compare, or going to dedicated stores? I think it'll be super interesting also to see it. Will men start shopping at places like Ulta or others, Sephora, those kinds of specialized shops, or will they have their own branches, divisions, or totally separate spin-off stores?
Yeah, and that's really why we wanted to conduct this research, right? Is we believe that men are underserved in a lot of, in the space today. And so this represents an opportunity to better tailor both products, but also shopping experiences to meet the needs of men uniquely. It's not as simple as taking a product that works for women and shifting it and giving it a package update and calling it a men's product. It's much more nuanced than that.
So once they got the product home, what did you find? Similarities, differences? How did the two worlds collide?
Absolutely. So, while there were a lot of differences in terms of motivators, approaches, and how they shopped the aisles, once they got product home, we did see quite a bit of similarities in terms of how they evaluated products, what they really liked and what they disliked about the products that they brought home. One of the things, so looking at some of the similarities and the delighters were, products that are delivering things like quick absorption. I put it on and I'm able to put my makeup on, or I put it on and I'm ready to walk out the door. Really important. And that goes hand in hand with lightweight texture. We also see balanced fragrance, a very common delighter for how to drive loyalty. We heard over and over and over again that the way that the product smells is really an important way to deliver that loyalty. And then clean and transparent ingredients was really the fourth main shared delighter that we saw, pretty important for both men and women in terms of driving satisfaction for products once they got home. Some of the pain points that we saw that were shared were short-lived hydration, right? I put it on and 20 minutes later, it doesn't feel like I've put on any moisturizer at all. And then frustrating packaging. This is, I think, a really interesting one for both men and women. Things like pumps that don't work, or caps that are too hard to get off, or packaging that's designed that you can't get at what's at the bottom, right? I'm spending a ton of money on these products and I can't get at that last, couple of weeks of product at the bottom, are all frustrators that we heard from both men and women. And then when we look at that product experience, there were some differences. I talked about this a little bit before, but sensory satisfaction was something that we heard a lot from women that didn't come up quite as strongly for men. Women, again, this is part of their routine. This is self-care. They're more, they're looking for things like, that the texture, how it feels on their face, how it smells. All of these sensory attributes are much stronger in terms of delivering satisfaction with a product. Packaging was another thing that stood out for women. And we saw this both when they were shopping the shelves and when they got it home. Women were much more likely to keep their products out on their counters. Just the emotional connection that they get with a product or a brand when it comes in a package that looks really elevated. It was something that stood out with women. And then the last thing that I thought was really interesting is that women were much more likely to be satisfied with a product without seeing immediate results. Women give much longer time horizons to delivering that satisfaction. So we heard women say things like, I really love this product. I'm not seeing results yet, but I'll give it about a month to decide if I think it's going to work for me. Whereas on the flip side, men tended to be much shorter in their willingness to stick with a product or a brand. Again, they typically are in the category because they're trying to alleviate some sort of concern that they have. And so for men, if I have dry skin and the product is not working in 3 days, it's probably not the right product for me. So that's what we tended to hear from men. Other things that we heard from men that were associated with product satisfaction were non-clogging formulas. Women also talked about this, but men were much more prominent about it. And it tended to be associated with facial hair, right? They do have sensitivities and are much more prone to breakouts. So any moisturizing product that caused anything like that certainly dropped in satisfaction.
Fantastic. Was there anything here? I know when you do a lot of qualitative work, you may be doing just a shopping journey, or you may be sending product in home for your consumers to evaluate. Is there anything you really saw that brought out a lot of value with connecting the two here, like the in-market method is designed to do?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, like I mentioned before, I think shoring up that say-do gap is really, really important, and a great way that in-market delivers, really great insight for brands. I think it's powerful to be able to see consumers' first reaction to a product, because most consumers are making a pretty quick decision about if they like or are going to repeat a product. So having them bring it home and catching that first experience as a recording, in their bathrooms is just such a powerful way to get at that, deeper emotion that you just can't replicate in any other way.
All right. Well, thank you, Tiffany. And now we're going to finish off our series now with a good drink. Grady, can you tell us about functional sodas?
Absolutely. Functional sodas. I'm sure we've all been hearing a lot of buzz around the category recently. In fact, functional sodas we're seeing are actually a bright spot in a slowing drink market. They're really showing a lot of strong recent growth recently. We're seeing newcomers enter the category, but we're also seeing big players like PepsiCo and Coca-Cola enter the space. But that said, a lot of consumers are still unaware of functional sodas, that they exist at all. And then those that are, a lot of them are unsure of what benefits that functional sodas offer. We do know, though, that consumers are increasingly choosing healthier options, and they're more mindful about what they're putting in their bodies. So this is a perfect time for a product like this to enter the market. With these products, though, there's a lot of confusion about them being healthier with these added health benefits versus being a better for you alternative to other options on the shelves, like regular sodas or other beverages. So in order to really understand this and explore this further, we sent low to non-users to a new store for them to buy a functional soda. This allowed us to capture the discovery experience from the shelf and entering the store all the way to trial later on down the road at home when they get to take their first sip.
So yours is really interesting. When I think about the 3 mini case studies we have here, Teresa's study sent people to a place they once loved, haven't been to in a long time. Tiffany's study sent people to a place where they currently actively visit. Whereas what you guys have chosen is sending someone to a grocery store that they're not currently shopping at. So can you tell me a little bit more about why you took that route versus sending them to the grocery store they go to every day?
Yes, definitely. So with a product like this, first and foremost, a lot just with a lack of familiarity around it, we wanted a true discovery experience. So we wanted to take consumers that didn't know the product, send them into a store that they're not familiar with. They're not familiar with the layout. And so with this, it really allowed for that organic experience. Otherwise, they might have known where to look, whether they're doing that consciously or subconsciously. And so with this approach and this methodology, we could really see how easily, or I guess not easily, that consumers were able to find the functional sodas in the store. So we really got an organic, real insight into that discovery experience that we wouldn't have otherwise.
Okay, so how did it go when you sent them somewhere new?
Interesting, very interesting. We saw a lot of strong interest once consumers were able to try the products later down the road once they got home, which I'll get into in a little bit. But we also saw a lot of confusion throughout the entire journey. At multiple steps along the journey, there was confusion. Obviously awareness is going to be low, especially given the way we designed the study with low to non-users. But as I mentioned earlier, even those that have heard of functional sodas, they do struggle to understand what is making them functional. Even when they're looking at the products and they're interacting with the products, there's still uncertainty. We hear a lot of terms like prebiotics and probiotics across categories these days. But consumers don't really know what they do. They've got this positive health halo. Consumers know that they're good for them, but the specific benefits that come along with them are unclear. So when it comes to their health, they don't really know what it does if they're going to consume them in their products. And this uncertainty is really making shoppers hesitant to buy them. There are some assumptions out there with functional sodas. They are mainly that they're just a healthier alternative or a type of diet soda. So healthy alternative to sodas, juices, drinks that might have higher calorie count or higher sugar count. These are just healthier options is generally the first assumption. And so with all this in mind, thinking about that, to grow the category, brands really need clearer and simpler messaging that is not only communicating what the product is, but consumers also need to know what exactly it's doing this for them and why it's worth paying a premium. And I'll get into pricing a little bit more, but consumers, one of their first things that they saw was, this is a higher price that I'm going to be paying for a beverage like this. So messaging, it needs to be also consumer friendly. As I mentioned earlier, some terms like pre and probiotics and other terms used to describe the benefits of functional sodas just go over consumers' heads. They get a little technical or scientific at times, and so they're hard for them to understand.
I feel like there's a real opportunity here for this category to learn from yogurt. I remember years ago now, although it makes me sound old to say, there were the very much smaller containers of yogurt that really talked about their gut health properties. I think Jamie Lee Curtis was the celebrity in those. Talking about a regimen and why you should consume this product, and also essentially why it was worth buying the smaller containers versus the bigger containers, which feels like it could, really help this kind of category move forward in that direction. So when they got to the store after they've done this, what did they find? Did they find it? Could they find it? What did they think?
Yeah. Firstly, these shoppers entered the store and they were just totally unsure where to look. The placement in the stores was very inconsistent across stores, and even within that, signage was minimal. We saw them going all over the place. We saw some consumers going to the soda section. We saw some consumers going to the produce section and expecting to find them by refrigerated juices. We saw some going to the water section and expecting to find them with sparkling waters. So There was a lot of confusion on where to find these. And also within stores, they were placed in multiple different places. So like each one of those sections that I just mentioned, in some stores, consumers may find them in those sections. When they were able to finally find them, the price point, as I mentioned earlier, is something that really stood out, as these are notably higher than other beverage options, including sodas and diet sodas. So we were able to see this. We were able to see consumers' reactions in real time, seeing them realize this price gap, and that was very telling. You can see hesitation with them as they were considering it, and you could see the questions on their face. What makes this worth it? Something that was really special about this study is that we were able to have consumers capture the real-time reactions on their phones. We asked them to take photos and videos. And so by doing that, we were able to see not only their facial expressions, but the tone in their voice, So a lot of those unspoken, unsaid findings, we were able to gather through this mission.
So I think a lot about products that we would test in this area in a central location test, either a sip test or a taste test, where we always ask purchase intent. Sometimes it's priced, sometimes it's unpriced. But here, I feel like you get a much more realistic reaction to whether or not consumers would purchase it or not, just based off of what it sounds like you had here was sticker shock.
Yes. So as I mentioned, this is a very holistic experience. In focus groups, we can gather the opinions from consumers of, in that room, in a setting that, might be a little bit less organic than a traditional shopping experience. So in market, it's letting you see that hesitation that I mentioned, but also we're able to feel the decision process that's happening in real time. As I mentioned, these consumers are filming those organic reactions in an organic setting. So this is giving the most authenticity in terms of discovery and in terms of an overall shopping experience.
So once they got the product home, what did they think?
This was very fun. So once consumers got the products home, they loved the flavor. Taste won very quickly across the board. However, consumers need to understand the benefits in order to drive trial and repeat purchase. So they've got a product in front of them that they taste good, that they enjoy. There's still hesitations. Why am I paying a higher price if I don't really understand what the benefits are? Something else that we learned during the shopping experience is that bright packaging is grabbing attention on the shelf. But as I mentioned, the messaging is where it's really falling short. So what is making it functional? Simple claims like, for gut health, these are easy to understand. They're easy to digest, no pun intended. But they're building trust much faster than scientific technology. So, the functional ingredients, consumers don't really know what those are. They want to hear, like, what is this going to do for me? How is this going to make me feel? Something else that I just remembered, shoppers really liked being able, when they were shopping in the store, they liked being able to have single can options, because this allows them to trial without high risk of buying, a multi-pack. There are multi-pack and single serve options for these products. And so having both of those options was something that really got them excited to, like, I'm going to take this home. I can also try multiple flavors if I want. I don't have to stick to one flavor. But once they've chosen their products, they, a lot of them grabbed those single serve options, took them home. They were expecting a little bit of a trade-off. So this trade-off that's coming to light is that they're expecting there to be a trade-off with health and taste. And so they were really pleasantly surprised when they got to have both good taste and health. That being said, I want to remind you, it took them a little bit to get to the point to where, like, okay, I understand that this is offering me something healthy. And so, just to reiterate once again, great taste alone is really not enough. Continued purchase really depends on clearly communicating why the drink is worth choosing over other options on the shelf, especially given that higher price.
Thanks, Grady. That's such a fascinating category to explore as part of this method. I'm not currently in this space. I've been kind of putting it off because of the price point, but now I feel like I need to go and look and explore it just in the name of science, even if I can just see if I can find them in my grocery stores. But that was fantastic way for us to wrap up the day. Before we all sign off, what I'd love to do is bring all three speakers back and hear from each of you from InMarket, this type of research method, the studies that you did. What do you really love most about InMarket research studies? And what do you think is most compelling about it for your clients?
Yeah, I'll go first. For me, it's about seeing behavior in context. So from drive-throughs to tables, the environment really shapes the experience. It's not really what people say, it's what they do. And when we look at our CLTs or our central testing that we do, they're great for getting your product innovation correct and ready for launch. But the in-market piece is such a complement to make sure it continues to deliver on what those expectations were once it's out in the wild. So really making sure that the product continues to deliver.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that, being in context is so critical to getting the best insights for front-end product development, or after you've launched a product, to understand how it's performing or how it could perform better. I also think, in a facility setting, for example, you're just not getting that competitive landscape as part of the discussion or as part of the inputs for, what drives satisfaction or success with a product. And, in many of the categories that we work on, these categories are changing daily. New entrants are coming into the market. And so I think being able to capture that is really, really important to make sure that your insights stay fresh and up to date.
I agree, completely agree with all of that. And just to add a little bit without sounding too repetitive, I feel like, particularly with this functional soda study, like once you're in the real world, you're really able to capture all those drivers and barriers along the way that you aren't going to always get in a focus group or an in-depth interview. And so product discovery, including any of the confusion that we heard about, or any of the packaging frustrations, or even packaging wins for that matter. And then leading into like hearing about like the sensory component, it's really a full consumer journey. And those are really what's going to drive brand action at the end of the day. So having these insights grounded in reality allows them to translate directly into strategy, operations, and ultimately innovation. So it's a full holistic package here.
Fantastic. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you, Teresa, Tiffany, and Grady for taking time out to share all of your fantastic research. Thank you everyone for joining us today. As we mentioned at the top of our webinar, to celebrate the launch of InMarket, Curion is offering an exclusive offer to those of you who are here. For the first 25 brands that reach out to us at the conclusion of this series, we're offering half off an InMarket research project in Q1. The offer is only good for those of you who are on the call right now and only for Q1. So if you're interested, please jump in and take advantage quickly. To receive this offer, or if you want to learn more about any of the research studies we've talked about here, each one of these studies has like a full immersive deck as well as additional phases to it. All you have to do is reach out to either myself, Rachel Buss, or to Gretchen Ahlstrom. Her information and my information is on the screen now. And we'll happily help you get in contact with the people who did this research study so you can learn more. We hope you enjoyed our presentation today. We certainly love sharing it with you, and we hope that you're leaving at least a little bit more inspired to see how your products are experienced in the real world. Thanks, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.